Far-right Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro continues to face domestic and international criticism for his dismissive attitude towards the coronavirus pandemic. This Monday, more than 82,000 third-year middle school students went back to classes in the Chinese capital Beijing to prepare for high school entrance exams. Mali's parliament picked a close ally of the president as its head on Monday, despite tensions in the West African state surrounding his recent election to the assembly. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, I'm Katrina Goss. Far-right Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro has faced domestic and international criticism for his dismissive attitude towards the coronavirus pandemic, downplaying the risks despite the growing evidence of its deadly impact on Brazil. Our correspondent Brian Meir brings us the latest on the situation there.
Reached the 11,000 mark in deaths from the deadly coronavirus pandemic over the weekend, propelling it into 6th place in the world's list of worst countries for the pandemic. As far-right President Jair Bolsonaro spent Saturday jet skiing and barbecuing and visiting fans without using any kind of protective equipment, continuing to tell people that they shouldn't worry about it, that it's just a little flu, the governors increased their lockdown measures. In the state of Maranhão, communist governor Flávio Dino issued a decree yesterday taking over the emergency rooms of all of the state's private hospitals. Meanwhile, São Paulo has worked hard to lower the occupancy rate of its ICU units. In the past week, ICU unit occupancy dropped from 90 to 83% in São Paulo, the capital, which is the hardest hit city in the state, and the statewide level is 67%. Now, São Paulo remains the epicenter of coronavirus transmission in Brazil. It has 3,700 deaths and over 40,000 cases documented so far. And the governor has announced that he's not going to ease any of the lockdown measures until the ICU hospital occupancy rates drop below 60% statewide level. That's definitely going to take a little more time because the death rates continue to increase. So for now, there is no sign that the lockdown measures implemented by the state governors are going to ease up despite far-right President Bolsonaro's anti-scientific conspiracy theory rhetoric.
Experts have warned that the real number of coronavirus cases in Brazil may be far higher due to a lack of widespread testing. Meanwhile, there are growing fears that COVID-19 may wreak havoc for indigenous communities in the Amazon who have denounced a lack of health services and means of protection.
Nobody came to help the community when we needed it the most. Almost the entire community fell sick with symptoms similar to COVID-19. I can't tell you what the disease was, but it happened at a time where we didn't expect it. I spent 10 days with a high fever. After 8 days, I got diarrhea. I started drinking lemon juice and taking homemade medicine. I had been taking Dipirona, but it was not having any effects. I started taking homemade medicine and then I felt like I was getting better, but I kept telling myself I would die.
The number of confirmed COVID-19 cases across Latin America has reached more than 374,000 despite preventative measures to contain the pandemic. Brazil remains the worst hit nation in the region and is followed by Peru with over 68,000 positive cases and almost 2,000 deaths. Meanwhile, Chile has officially reported more than 30,000 cases and over 300 deaths. They're followed by Ecuador, Colombia and Argentina as the countries with the highest number of positive cases in the Latin American region. Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador announced that his cabinet will meet to debate the plan to resume economic activities in the country. The Mexican president indicated that during the meeting they will assess the resumption of activities by sector, maintaining the health measures. He assured that the strategy implemented by the nation's health institutions to confront the novel coronavirus has been successful. Finally, the president also added that according to projections, the decline of the COVID-19 epidemic in the country should begin in the next few days.
Por eso vamos ya a presentar un plan.
That is why we are going to submit a reopening plan. I insist, little by little, being careful with health measures in place, moving forward, and if we have any problems, we will go back and rectify. But we already have the conditions to do that because we already have more doctors. Tomorrow we will announce it, but we hired almost 25,000 health workers in these 2-3 months.
Peruvian health authorities on Monday began a massive campaign of rapid COVID-19 testing in food markets, which have become major hotspots of the coronavirus outbreak. About 1,500 traders from Ciudad de Dios, a fresh food market in southern Lima, were tested for the coronavirus in a campaign organised by the Ministry of Health with support from the police and the armed forces, who cordoned off the perimeter of the market, which was closed for a couple of days to be disinfected. According to the ministry, such markets are the main sources of infection of the virus in Peru, and similar campaigns will be carried out in other parts of the country. And more than 200 textile and e-commerce companies and restaurants resumed their activities in Peru this Monday after almost 2 months of lockdown. The lockdown order in force in Peru prohibits all commercial activity except essential services such as food stores, pharmacies and banks, but the government has launched an economic reactivation plan in 3 phases between May and August. The Ministry of Economy and Finance projects that activity will gradually recover and operate at 70% of its capacity by the end of May. Peru has reported the second highest number of coronavirus cases in the Latin American region at over 68,000, while it's registered almost 2,000 COVID-19 fatalities. Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez this Monday offered a briefing on the COVID-19 epidemic in the country.
We must inform that in the last 24 hours, 8 new cases have been detected, bringing the total in Venezuela to 422. 3 of them are from the state of Aragua, 2 from the state of La Guaira, 1 from the state of Falcón, 1 from the state of Miranda, and 1 from the state of Nueva Esparta. Of these 8 cases, 3 were infected in the community, 3 are Venezuelan citizens who arrived from Colombia. Again, imported cases are an important factor in people's infection. The other 2 cases are also from Venezuelan brothers and sisters who are returning to our homeland.
In statements to the Colombian press, Venezuelan Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza announced that the authorities had opened investigations into the Colombian Navy vessels recently found abandoned in Venezuelan territory. Arreaza assured that the Venezuelan Armed Forces and the Attorney General's Office are undertaking the relevant investigations following the discovery of the abandoned Navy vessels. The Colombian Navy issued a statement claiming that the boats had been swept away by the current in the early hours of this Saturday. Arreaza stressed the strange circumstances, especially in the context of the recent forward incursion into Venezuela by mercenaries trained in Colombia. The Foreign Minister noted that since 2018, the Venezuelan authorities have been denouncing the presence of mercenary and paramilitary training camps in Colombia as part of plans to launch attacks on the country. And Venezuelan authorities announced the capture of 8 mercenaries on Sunday night who formed part of the failed Operation Gideon. 7 men and 1 woman were among those arrested in Petaquirito, about 50 kilometers from Caracas. Earlier on Sunday, 3 mercenaries were captured in the town of Colonia Tovar in Aragua state. Meanwhile, another 3 mercenaries were caught in San Miguel in La Guaira state with links to Operation Gideon. This made for a total of 14 people linked to the foiled coup plot who were arrested on Sunday. More stories coming up after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio voiced tremendous concern on Sunday over an increase in cases of a pediatric syndrome that scientists suspect could be linked to COVID-19, which has left at least 3 people dead statewide. The mayor said 38 cases of pediatric multi-system inflammatory syndrome have been detected in New York City, with an additional 9 suspected cases awaiting confirmation. Shortly afterwards, State Governor Andrew Cuomo said the New York Health Department was probing 85 potential cases statewide of the syndrome, which exhibits similarities to Kawasaki disease, a very rare condition that primarily affects children aged up to 5, characterized by inflammation of blood vessels, resulting in fever, skin peeling and joint pain. The United Kingdom and France have also reported several cases. Russian President Vladimir Putin said on Monday the country's non-working period imposed to contain the spread of the coronavirus will be lifted from Tuesday. The president's announcement comes after Russia reported a record number of new daily cases, with more than 11,000 people testing positive over the last 24 hours. Putin emphasized the need for the country to start, as of May 12th, a plan to resume work and recover a number of strategic economic sectors, such as construction, communications, energy and agriculture. The president said that the measures to restrict movement implemented in the country for more than a month have saved the lives of hundreds of thousands of citizens. Russia has now reported the fourth highest number of COVID-19 cases in the world at more than 221,000.
Starting from tomorrow, May the 12th, the national period of non-working days will be over in all the country and for all sectors of the economy. But the fight against the epidemic is not over. Its danger remains.
Prime Minister of New Zealand Jacinda Ardern announced a plan on Monday to reopen the economy and the nation's schools over the next 10 days. According to the Prime Minister, life in the country is expected to resemble what it was like before the outbreak in many respects, although social distancing rules will still apply and social gatherings will be limited to 10 people at events like weddings and funerals. Under the plan, almost all businesses will be able to reopen from Thursday and schools will reopen from next Monday on. New Zealand has been successful in reducing the number of new cases of the virus, reporting almost 1,500 cases and 21 deaths.
If you do your bit, we all must keep doing ours. That means continuing our strong border controls, hand hygiene and physical distancing, which have and will continue to be our primary wall of defence against COVID. They're tools that have worked. But we all know there is more to do. We may have won a few battles, but we have not won the war.
Ukraine's troubled healthcare system has been overwhelmed by COVID-19, with medical workers forced to improvise protective masks and suits. The country's corruption-ridden economy has been drained by 6 years of war with separatists in the east, while the year-old administration of President Volodymyr Zelensky inherited healthcare reforms begun by his predecessor that are still being rolled out. The reforms have slashed government subsidies, leaving hospital workers underpaid and poorly equipped. Medical workers across Ukraine have held rallies to protest the reforms, and some hospital chiefs even staged hunger strikes. As of Monday, the Eastern European country has reported over 15,000 COVID-19 cases and more than 400 deaths. The airport of the Croatian capital, Zagreb, reopened on Monday as part of an easing of restrictions to curb the spread of the novel coronavirus. The country's capital resumed daily flights to and from Split and Dubrovnik twice a day. Public transport, including trains, have also resumed services. Passengers were advised to keep a distance of at least 1 metre from each other and to use protective masks and hand disinfectants, with dispensers installed at entry points. Shopping malls have also reopened but have seen few shoppers so far. According to Johns Hopkins University, Croatia has reported 2,196 confirmed COVID-19 cases and 91 deaths. This Monday, more than 82,000 third-year middle school students went back to classes in the Chinese capital, Beijing, to prepare for high school entrance exams. On April 27th, about 50,000 third-year high school students returned to schools to prepare for college entrance exams. Students must show their valid health codes and tracking records of their travels in the past 14 days on their cell phones to enter schools. Meanwhile, the National Health Commission said there had been no new COVID-19 deaths reported in the country, extending that record for almost a month. China has confirmed 4,633 COVID-19 fatalities and almost 83,000 cases. Authorities in South Korea are searching for thousands of people who may have been infected in a cluster of coronavirus cases linked to nightclubs and bars in the capital, Seoul. The resurgence of cases has raised concerns about a second wave of infections. Officials reported 35 new cases as of midnight on Sunday, representing the highest numbers in more than a month. 29 of the new cases were linked to several Seoul nightclubs and bars. Authorities have tested more than 2,450 people who went to the night spots, but are still trying to track about 3,000 more. The spike in cases comes just as the government was easing restrictions and reopening schools and businesses. South Korea has reported almost 11,000 COVID-19 cases and over 250 fatalities. And we're taking one last break now, but stay with us for more news from the Global South. Welcome back to From the South. Mali's parliament picked a close ally of President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta as its head on Monday, despite tensions in the West African state surrounding his recent election to the assembly. Moussa Timbine, the new president of the parliament, contested legislative elections in March, but according to an initial vote count, he lost his seat in the first round. However, Mali's constitutional court overturned the result on April 30th, along with dozens of others, provoking several days of protests in the capital Bamako and in regional cities. On Monday, Timbine was elected president of the 147-seat parliament with 134 votes in his favour. His opponent, former Prime Minister Moussa Mara, received just 8 votes. At 46 years old, Timbine has spent most of his political career in the ruling Rally for Mali party and is considered a staunch ally of President Keïta. Senegalese President Macky Sall announced that coronavirus restrictions adopted over the past few weeks will be eased from Tuesday onwards. Senegal has reported over 1,800 COVID-19 cases and 19 deaths.
I decided that the emergency state measures taken will be eased as follows. From Tuesday, May 12, 2020 onwards, curfew hours will be from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. instead of 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. Office hours will be from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. and markets and other businesses, which previously could only open on certain days, will be open 6 days and closed on the day dedicated to cleaning.
The tiny nation of Djibouti has begun lifting restrictions despite reporting the highest prevalence of novel coronavirus cases in East Africa. Authorities announced that Djibouti would begin lifting lockdown measures in a bid to relieve pressure on its economy. To date, the tiny Horn of Africa nation that hosts major US and French military bases has recorded 1,210 coronavirus cases, representing a very high number relative to its population of just 1 million. Foreign Minister Mahmoud Ali Yusuf stated on Sunday that the stakes are high, but there was no other option than to resume work nationwide. The President of Ghana, Nana Akufo-Addo, delivered a national address on Sunday to provide an update on the COVID-19 pandemic and announce a raft of measures to contain the spread of the virus.
It is important to stress that 533 out of the 921 new cases recorded between last Wednesday and Thursday are factory workers from a fish processing factory located in Tema. All 533 persons were infected by one person. The implementation of our strategy of aggressively tracing, testing, and treating is our surest way of rooting out the virus.
According to the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, nearly 2,700 new coronavirus cases were reported across the continent in the last 24 hours. The number of coronavirus cases in Africa reached over 63,000 on Monday. South Africa still ranks as the worst hit nation in terms of the number of confirmed cases, and more than 10,600, while it's seen a relatively low death toll of 206. Egypt appears next on the list with over 9,700 cases and more than 500 fatalities. Meanwhile, Ghana surpassed Nigeria last Saturday as the worst hit country in Western Africa with 4,700 cases and 22 fatalities. Cameroon leads the figures in Central Africa with more than 2,500 cases and over 100 deaths. Finally, Sudan surpassed Djibouti as the most affected Eastern African nation with over 1,000 cases and 70 fatalities. India has registered a record jump of over 4,000 new COVID-19 cases in 24 hours. The news comes as the country prepares to transport thousands of stranded migrants back to their homes. This surge in the number of coronavirus cases has pushed the total number reported to over 67,000. Meanwhile, the number of people who have died from COVID-19 has risen to over 2,200. The Indian government announced on Monday that train services are set to gradually resume from Tuesday. This comes as India inches towards the end of the third phase of a nationwide lockdown to combat the spread of the coronavirus. All passenger train services have been on halt since March 22nd.
From May 12th, Indian Railways will start operating passenger trains in a phased manner. These trains, special trains, will leave New Delhi railway station to 15 destinations.
At least 22 people have been injured and dozens were trapped after an Indonesian oil tanker burst into flames. The incident happened in one of the country's busiest ports at Belawan, with rescuers scrambling to reach dozens trapped on board. The injured have been taken to hospital. The cause of the explosion is not yet known. On May 11th, 1981, legendary Jamaican singer-songwriter Bob Marley died at the age of 36. Without a doubt, the most iconic figure of reggae music, his mix of ska, rocksteady, rock, blues and soul rhythms captivated the public and made him a global star. Marley was a Pan-Africanist and rooted his beliefs in his Rastafarian faith. His first album was released in 1965 and he continued recording non-stop, releasing 17 more albums until his death. And we finish this news brief with one of his most popular songs, Redemption Song. For Telesur English, I'm Katrina Goss. Thank you for watching and enjoy the music.
Slow into this music, bro. This music you're going to put it up in your house. A placard as one of the vehicles that help to free the people from this chain and bondage of oppression. Minutes after they took I from the bottomless pit, but my hand was made strong by the hand of the Almighty. We forward in this generation, triumphantly. Won't you help to sing another song of freedom? Is all I ever have. Redemption songs, redemption songs. Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Have no fear for atomic energy, 'cause none of them can stop the time. How long shall they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? Some say it's just a part of it. We've got to fulfill the book. Won't you help to sing another song of freedom?